size grade do you want? And I'll let Kendra tell you a little bit about her journey from 2003 to now, and give you an idea of how she's designing the size grade she wants.
So I'm Kendra Wergin. I graduated in '03 and went on from here to William & Mary, and I've spent the last 4 years doing a variety of things that are all education and youth oriented. I think part of the reason I got into this was actually because the governor's school started out in TJ. I was the second class to graduate from this building, and I think spending 2 years in TJ with students coming from a very different situation sort of sowed the seeds for what I ended up doing after college. So I'm going to talk today about my experience as a teacher with a program called Teach for America, and then about a program I did this past summer in the Balkans called World at Play. A lot of people don't know what Teach for America is. It's becoming much more well known throughout the country now, but it's not in Richmond yet. It will be at some point soon. I know they're considering it. But I have these interesting pictures which kind of are a great metaphor for what my teaching experience was like. This is me at the end of my first year of teaching at the senior class picnic, and I'm fighting my favorite student from that year. The teaching for me was kind of like a battle, at least at first. It was very, very difficult, and ultimately, through a lot of hard work, I managed to emerge victorious, as you see there. Teach for America is a nonprofit that operates across the United States, including in Hawaii, and it places mostly recent college graduates to teach for 2 years, working specifically with underprivileged students. You can teach pretty much anything. I taught high school Spanish, so going to the governor's school was great preparation for that. And I taught in Washington, D.C, which was a really exciting place to be in terms of what's going on currently in education reform. But Teach for America operates with this goal at the bottom of the screen, that one day all children in this nation will have the opportunity to attain an excellent education. And one of the things that I really wasn't that aware of before I started looking into Teach for America as a possibility was just how big the divide is between privileged and underprivileged kids in this country. You would think that in a place where we talk about the American dream and this is the land of opportunity, that all kids automatically have good teachers and they all have the same potential outcomes academically, and that's not the case at all. And I think going to a school as great as the governor's school and then going to William & Mary kind of kept me in this bubble of gifted people for 8 years, and so I really wasn't aware just how big the differences were, and that's what I found out as a teacher. So this is from a message that a friend of mine in Germany sent me after reading a blog post during my first year of teaching. I'm going to show you the link to the blog so you can look at it if you want. I had written a post about an exercise I had given my students. I was teaching them adjectives of nationality. So I gave them a list of people I thought they would immediately recognize, famous people, and they were supposed to write sentences saying something like, Queen Elizabeth is English. And it turned out that the vast majority of my students couldn't identify a lot of the people in that. I had students, seniors in high school, who couldn't tell me what country Hitler was from. They had never heard of Leonardo da Vinci. All these other names were just completely foreign to them. And so I wrote about this, and I'm just like, my God, how is it possible that seniors in high school do not know basic things like this? I also had students who couldn't identify North America on a map. And the answer to this question is that there are lots of different reasons for this. I'm going to give you another, this is a very real example of where my students were at. I actually taught in Maryland, just a mile outside of D.C. And in Maryland, the equivalent of the SOLs are the high school assessments, and you have to pass 4 of them in order to graduate, just 4. And they are given during your sophomore year of high school. During my second year, I got to see the results for all of my students, and this is how many had passed each of the subjects at that point. 17% had passed biology, 48% had passed algebra, algebra. This is algebra 1, not algebra 2, algebra 1. 27% who passed English, and 49% who passed government. You need all 4 to graduate, and a lot of my students spent all of their high school career taking these tests over and over again and still not passing. They're not hard tests, and these are basic subjects, and they're just for 4 classes out of everything that they take during 4 years of high school. But a lot of students get to their senior year still not having passed all 4 of these, and so now my school has to do these projects with students that ultimately might get them the diploma, but certainly don't mean that they're ready to go out into the real world and do productive work. So this is a very real situation. My school was not the worst in my school district. It had a lot of good resources. I had LCD projectors in my classroom, but a lot of things contribute to why students aren't able to perform as well if they're coming from situations of high poverty. There are a lot of really bad teachers out there. Here at the governor's school, you sort of take that for granted that you've got great teachers. Out in the real world, at the school like where I taught, a lot of the teachers are there just to have some sort of income. They don't care about the kids. They don't care about what they teach. There was a teacher at my school who got fired because he'd been playing PlayStation with his 9th grade English students for an entire semester, and no one had known that. So that's the situation. And this starts even before kids get to school. You can look this up on the internet. This is something that came out a couple of years ago. The difference in terms of preparation for school is there even before you get to kindergarten. Look at the difference between what kids of professionals have and what kids of poor parents have. So they're getting to kindergarten not even having the same level of vocabulary. And that just has a snowball effect when you combine it with bad teachers and other circumstances at home that make it hard for them to learn. Health concerns are a really big problem with students like the ones that I taught. A lot of them can't see, they can't afford to get glasses, and they don't have good medical care in general, so they will come to school being sick for long periods of time, and they're not able to get the care that they need in order to be able to focus on being in school. I worked for D.C. public schools after I taught, and one of the things that I learned there was that in the District of Columbia at that time, the testing data showed that you were actually better off staying home if you were a 4th grader in D.C. because you were likely to learn negative amounts of information as a 4th grader. In D.C., if you're a 4th grader, you are about 2 grade levels behind peers of similar socioeconomic status in New York City. And that's just something that continues to grow. So the students that I was getting in high school were multiple grade levels behind in terms of reading and math, and that's something that's just very, very hard to catch up. So Teach for America puts people in schools with the goal of raising student achievement levels. So my goal as a high school teacher was that my students would get B's or higher on all of my assessments. If you teach elementary school, your goal is that your kids will grow at least 1.5 years in reading and math. And a lot of teachers are able to accomplish that through really, really hard work. Just got a few more statistics here. So Teach for America's 20th anniversary was actually this past year, and we had a big summit in D.C. And I got to go to a session with a bunch of famous people, including the Assistant Secretary of Education for Civil Rights. And she gave us these statistics. So I at least used to think that Brown versus Board of Education kind of solved everything. Turns out that's not true. Schools are more segregated today. 40% of Latino students and 30% of Black students are in schools where they are 90 to 100% of the student body. And my school was one of those. I taught at a school that was 88% Black, 12% Latino, maybe 3 white kids in the whole school. And I had a conversation with my students right before I left at the end of my 2nd year and was talking to them about other schools. They live in a very racially isolated community. And I said something about mostly white schools, and they were like, "What do you mean? You mean mostly white schools?" try to be proactive about overcoming those challenges. And a lot of my students did go on to some sort of secondary education. I have a lot who are at community college, some are at four-year schools, and they're all working hard, but they have to overcome so much more when they get there because they haven't mastered the basic skills of high school. So this is my classroom. It's my classroom from my second year. My first year I taught in a trailer outside the building. Pluses and minuses to both of those. Trailer outside, I had to walk through the rain, but inside I had to deal with a lot of bugs and other things that are not so nice. But that's my classroom. My first year I taught Spanish 1 and Spanish 2. My second year, which was super stressful, I taught Spanish 1, Spanish 2, and IB Spanish. So my students ranged from 9th grade to 12th grade. I think I most enjoyed working with 12th graders just because they at least had some idea of what they wanted to do. They had made it that far in high school, so they were at least a little bit more motivated. And when I say they made it that far in high school, my school had a dropout rate of over 50%. So the freshman class accounted for about half of the student body. And that included kids who were coming into 9th grade for the first time and then repeat 9th graders. But as you go on, if you go for a yearbook for where I taught, the pictures of the kids actually increase in size rather than decreasing as you go up in the grades because you have so much more room to fill the certain number of pages. So the 9th grade kids' pictures are really small. By the time they get to 11th grade, they're like the size of the senior pictures here. And so you can see the achievement gap even just in the yearbooks. So these are some of my kids. This is one of the best things I've ever done. I did not go to college thinking I would teach. Sort of this idea I had in the back of my head, oh, maybe I'll teach eventually. And so it was kind of a random deviation from what I had been planning to do. I wanted to go to law school, but I also wanted to have some sort of experience that would give me a bit more to push me through law school. I wanted to go with some sort of goal in mind, and now I have it. I saw all sorts of injustices taking place against these beautiful kids, and that's why I'm in law school now. I'm hoping to work to make sure that they all get the educational opportunities that they deserve, just like those of you who go here have. My students did average a B or over on all of my exams, which was great. These two pictures are kids demonstrating that they had gotten to sort of the upper echelon of the grades, and they were just so excited to see things like that, to be recognized in that way for getting good grades. A lot of other teachers didn't give them that kind of recognition, and so it didn't take much for me to win them over to my side and get them motivated because I cared, and that was not what they were getting in most of their other classes. So that's basically all I have to say about Teach for America. We'll have some time if you want to ask me questions at the end, but I'm going to move on to the other thing I came to talk about. So this past summer I spent 8 weeks in Europe with this charity called World at Play, and it was founded in Wales back in 2004. And the idea behind World at Play is that you can do a lot for communities just by playing games with kids. So in 2004, a team of people went to Balkans. They went through all of the countries I'm going to talk about now, and then Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey, and worked with kids there for 3 months, just playing games and building the kind of self-confidence and teamwork that a lot of people just sort of take for granted, having grown up having PE classes and playing on sports teams. That's not the case in the countries where we worked. We worked with communities where there isn't gym, they don't have balls or other things to play with, so we often would bring in equipment and then leave it there, hoping that it would continue to be used after we had gone. So this is a map of what we did. We started out in Wales, and I'm going to talk about each of these steps. We spent a week in Wales doing training, and then spent another week in Austria practicing, working with kids who didn't speak English, but who spoke German so they could understand us a little bit better. And then we spent the rest of the time in Croatia, Bosnia, Kosovo, and Serbia, working with different communities in each place.
Question Goodwin, please report to Black Box. Question Goodwin, please move to the black box.
And kind of tailoring what we would do according to what we observed the needs to be of each community. There were 9 of us on the team. We literally drove from Wales to Serbia and back in that van, which was a lot of time spent in the car, but was really fun and gave me some good stories to tell. The 9 of us were from different countries, 2 people from Canada, 1 from Portugal, 1 from France, and 1 from Bosnia. I was the only American, which was pretty cool. And the 9 of us spoke 7 different languages, which was also really great. So we were just a really interesting mix of people. This is another thing that was absolutely life-changing for me. These people are my family now. I spent 2 weeks in the UK just over New Year's going to see all of them. And it was just an incredible experience. So we started in Wales. This is actually a school. It's an IB school in Wales that, as much as I love the governor's school, made me a little jealous that I didn't get to go to a place like this. It's actually a castle.
It's like TJ.
But we spent a week there just learning all of these different games that we were going to play with kids. So we played sports too, but we also learned games that I had never heard of before. My favorite was called Wah. And if you want to know what it is, I can tell you at the end. And we got to work with 2 elementary schools in Wales just to practice what we were doing. Then we got to Austria. I don't have any pictures of kids we worked with in Austria, but they left us this cute little note on the blacktop. It says "World at Game," so close enough. But we worked with kids at all different grade levels, and my first group there was just the little kindergartners who spoke 0 English, and I spoke 0 German, and that was really interesting. But it was really good to have that kind of transition period, learning to instruct in English and see that with a bit of creativity and a lot of demonstrating, we could still make ourselves understood. Then from there we moved on to Croatia. My mom's family is actually from Croatia, so I had been there before. And in Croatia, this is one of the 2 places where I'm most proud of the work that we did. We worked with an orphanage and then with 2 adult rehabilitation centers. So these are homes for adults with intellectual disabilities. And we all had experience working with kids, but none of us had experience working with disabled adults. And we were really nervous about what we were going to be able to do. And it turned out to be awesome. That picture on the left, we've got face paint on because the last day we did something called Mini Olympics, and so we divided everybody into color teams and came up with events, and they competed against each other, and it was really great. So it was a good challenge for us to sort of think outside even what we had been trained to do and think about how we could change the games a little bit in order to make them more accessible to the adults that we were working with. And the kids were great too. On each of these slides I have pictures of my favorite kids. So this little guy in the top right is Andrea, he's 6. He and I spent a great afternoon together actually at a river. He can sort of swim, but not really. And so he would climb to the top of this huge inflatable iceberg and get to the top and go, "Kendra!" and wave at me in the water and then jump, and I would, pick him up and swim him back, and we just did this for 2 hours, and it was great. So we brought a lot of smiles to people's faces throughout the trip, and the kids were crying when we left, and we were crying too, and it was just great to form those relationships, even over the course of just a week, working with them for 2 hours a day. It was very obvious that we had made an impact on them, and it was just like teaching here was. I left feeling like I'd made a measurable impact on people. Croatia is also a beautiful country, as you can see by these 2 pictures. If you ever get a chance to go, I highly recommend it. It's just across from Italy, it's not super far away. We spent about 10 days then in a town called Mostar, which is in actually the Herzegovina part of Bosnia. And Mostar is one of the cities that was hit hardest by the war during the 90s. I have tons of pictures like this one that show completely gutted buildings that were clearly very beautiful at one time, but even 15 years after the war ended are still just sitting there. A lot of things have not been rebuilt. This bridge was very famous throughout all of Europe. It was built hundreds of years ago, was destroyed at the end of the 90s during the war, and it's just now been rebuilt. And so it's sort of a symbol of coming back together, but Mostar is still a very culturally divided city. There's one side of the river where everyone is Muslim, and one side where everyone is Catholic, and from what I understand, people do not often cross the river, even now. So this was a really interesting place for us to work. We lived at an orphanage there. It was actually formerly financed by Hosni Mubarak. Really strange place to work. There were no adults around. We just never saw adults. They were just kids. So it was perhaps good that we were living there with them for a week. The little boy in the top left corner, his name is Erwin. He's 3. He and his 5-year-old brother were just left at this orphanage about a month before we got there. So I spent a lot of time just hanging out with him and holding him and kind of being a mother figure for him. And he's probably my favorite out of all the kids that we worked with. And I think about him multiple times every day and just hope that he's okay. So it was really great to be part of a community where we really were so needed, not only for what we were doing, but just being present and being role models for kids of all different ages. We went from Mostar to a really little town called Livno, which isn't particularly scarred by the war. We weren't working with particularly disadvantaged kids there either, but it was kind of a nice break for us to recharge between Mostar and then Kosovo. So we were there for a week. The 9 of us lived in a little cottage with 2 rooms and 1 bathroom, which was really interesting. But we had a really good time. I got to work the whole week with, I think they were 11 and 12-year-olds. And so I got to form really close relationships with all of them, and some of them spoke some English, so that helped with that. This bottom right picture, we played a lot of parachute games. I don't know if any of you ever got to do that when you were at PE back in the day. But,
Natasha Duncan, report to the attendance office. Natasha Duncan, report to attendance.
I don't miss this teaching. But we played a lot of parachute games, and you can see these little balls bouncing around. I have great video from this particular session where we had everyone close their eyes, and they're just moving the parachute like this, and then we dumped all these balls on, and they opened their eyes, and the balls were just everywhere, and people were screaming, and it was really great. So we brought, again, a lot of smiles and laughter to the kids that we worked with there. And then we went to Kosovo. None of us on the trip had been to Kosovo before. Still very interesting place to be politically and security-wise. That sign in the bottom left is at the border. We crossed from Serbia, and for those of you who don't know, Serbia still considers Kosovo to be part of Serbia. So there are lots of problems related to that. And while we were there was actually a big problem with the border, making international headlines. We weren't sure for a while if we were going to be able to get out. Fortunately, we did, but it was kind of a tense time to be there. And World at Play had never gone to Kosovo before, so we spent a lot of time doing lots of little sessions with many different partners to kind of establish relationships for future trips. And we spent the most time working in an Ashkali community just outside, Pristina's the capital, just outside Pristina. And that's what these kids are in the picture. Very, very, very poor community. It's the closest thing to a slum that I've been in outside of Brazil. This building on the right is sort of a school, which is where the community center was that we were working with. Most of these kids are not in school, which is what the community center exists to try to fix. So it was a really challenging situation for us to be working with students with kids who had never been in school. So they hadn't really ever been socialized to sit quietly and listen to instructions or do anything related to what we were doing with them. And that made things really challenging. And as you can see sort of behind these kids, we also didn't really have a great facility to work with them. We were in a field, and the first game we played was the 9 of us had big garbage bags, and the kids ran around and picked up 9 huge garbage bags worth of crap from the field, just so that we could play there. And so it's a heavy dose of reality for us, but this is the other thing that I just look back on as so rewarding. I worked with really, really little kids, like 2 and 3-year-olds, and we had had to adjust a lot of what we'd been doing because every time we brought out equipment, there was just pandemonium. Kids had never seen balls before, they hadn't seen hula hoops, just craziness ensued. So we had to really break things down, and each day we had little goals that we would work towards so that by the end of the week, the goal was we can bring out bean bags without the kids throwing them at each other. But it was really great because we saw that progress happen every single day, and I wish I could show you video of this. What often happened, but particularly here, was that it was hard for us to drive in and drive out of the place where we were going to do sessions because the participants would run and start banging on the van. And I have video of us leaving one day, and we literally had to have two guys in the group stand on the back of the van to prevent kids from jumping up and riding along. And they would just run and just be banging on the side of the van. They were just so excited to have us there. And so, again, it was really bittersweet to be leaving them, but we certainly saw the difference that we made there. And hopefully, World of Play is going to be doing a lot more in Kosovo in the future. And then the last place we were was Serbia. Novi Sad is a pretty big city. It's about an hour north of Belgrade. And we worked with an orphanage there. We didn't live in the orphanage this time, but this is a very different place. There were adults. The kids were very well cared for, and so we got to relax a little bit, not having to deal with those factors. But we were there the afternoons and evenings. We got to play some games we hadn't been able to play up to that point. I ran a great capture the flag session. It was awesome. This was just this huge compound. Got the whole group of kids involved at night. We played 3 rounds of capture the flag, and I loved it. And I was very proud of myself that I was able to explain that in English to kids who spoke Serbian, and we still managed to make it happen. This kid on the right is my favorite from there. His name is Ozren. I think he's like 9. But by the time we left Serbia, these kids were calling us brother and sister. And a lot of them are actually on Facebook, so I'm friends with some of them, and we don't really communicate with each other, but they're there. Occasionally they'll like a picture or something. They don't really know what's going on, but it's nice that we can stay in touch with them. So we left Serbia and spent 3 days driving back to Wales, and then I got on a plane and started law school a week later, which was a bit of a transition for me. But these are all the kids we worked with. This is actually the background of my computer. And I have a whole wall in my apartment just covered with pictures of the kids we worked with. They're present every day in my mind. I have a tattoo now on my wrist of one of the words that we learned this summer that we used with all the kids. It means come on. So the word is Haida. Kids would yell at us, Haida, Haida. So we run. So World of Play was a great experience for those of you who are students. I would encourage you to just kind of tuck this into the back of your mind as something you might investigate later on. I am helping to run World of Play now, so I'm doing all of our social media stuff. If you get on Facebook or follow us on Twitter, everything's coming from me, and I'm also in charge of recruitment and selection, so if you want to come on an expedition, I would encourage you to stay tuned. So we're hoping to do another one in September. Part of the problem this summer was that a lot of the kids were away because they weren't in school. So we decided it makes more sense to go while more kids will be there so we can reach more people. So September is when the next one's happening, but definitely check out our website. I'm going to be working to put a lot of other stuff up there. But if you get on the Facebook page, you can scroll back through, and I was writing updates the entire time we were there about different things that we were doing. We ran a really great session with the Peace Camp in Kosovo, which was also pretty cool. So there's a lot more things to be said. At that point, I'll turn it over for questions, but that's my email address. Welcome to email me about anything. And these are my 2 blogs. The first one is from my 2 years of teaching, and then the second one I did last year. I was working but didn't really have anything to do in my job, so I spent a lot of time writing about education. And so there's a lot there about lots of different issues within education reform that you might find interesting.
So, could you tell us a little bit about how World of Play was organized? Who's behind it? How was it funded?
Yeah, a couple of guys who actually went to the school where we did the training in Wales thought it up. There's a very similar organization called Right to Play, which I think is based in the UK, but they have offices all over the world. If you watch the Olympics this summer, I think you're going to see a lot of stuff about Right to Play. The founder of World at Play actually works for them now, but it's funded mostly through donations. Each of us raised about $1,600 to go on the trip, which is still an incredible deal considering it was 2 months of travel. But they're looking for more money now. They're actually doing something later this spring. They've partnered with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and they're going to take a group of PwC employees back to Serbia, where we were working, to kind of show them what we were doing and get them involved so that we can get some corporate sponsorship too.
And how many years has it been going?
Well, it started in 2004, but we've only done 3 expeditions. The last one was in 2006, so there was sort of a 5-year hiatus, but now we're back.
Kendra, do you have, I know you're in law school and you have a passion for making sure that kids get quality education. When you finish your degree, what do you think would be the first thing you would try to focus on or tackle?
Well, before I started law school, I just said I was going to do something to work with kids, hopefully with education specifically. Then after this trip over the summer, I've shifted that a little bit to I want to work with kids in post-conflict areas. I'm not sure what that means in terms of my future employment. I'm working for the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia this summer, which hopefully will get me sort of an in at the UN, which is where I'd really love to work. I'm not entirely sure. I don't want to live in the United States. I'd love to live in a community like the ones I was in this summer and really be hands-on in what I'm doing. That's what I miss most about teaching, is knowing at the end of every day that I actually made an impact. I saw a difference. So hopefully something that allows me to do that, but I'm not really sure.
So, do you think Teach for America is more works more for your own benefit or for the benefit of the kids? Like, is the emphasis on your own self-discovery, or is it just the teaching?
I think it's both. For me, it was a huge personal experience, and I think that's the case for everybody. But we definitely make a difference in the lives of kids, and the commitment is just 2 years. That's what we're required to do. But a lot of my friends from Teach for America are still teaching or have moved on to school leadership positions or things like that. A lot of people stay involved with education in some capacity. So I think that's part of the personal transformation that happens. I mean, for me, it was huge. It's completely changed my perspective on what it means to be working hard. I got through most of college thinking, oh, I'm so busy, I'm doing so much, I couldn't possibly take on any more than I'm doing now. And then I started teaching and realized that in college I was working to maybe 20% of my capacity. And I wouldn't recommend doing as much as I did. While I was teaching, I kind of overloaded myself. So my second year, I was teaching the 3 different Spanish classes. I was also getting a master's degree in education, and I had a bunch of leadership positions in my school, within Teach for America, and I was the swim coach, and I was applying to law school. So I didn't really ever sleep, didn't have much of a life. I wouldn't recommend that, but it was useful to see what my limit was. And even now, if I wake up feeling tired after staying up night a long time studying, I'm never as tired as I was when I was teaching. That's nice to know.
Close to tears as you leave all of these children who were so popular, and then you must have left a big hole at the school when you went away. All those leadership positions you were filling, and do you have any sense of what happened at the school after you were?
Yeah, I've been back to my school a bunch of times. Fortunately, we were able to get someone else from Teach for America to fill my teaching position, which is good. We've more or less taken over the Spanish department there, which makes me feel good about things. I don't know. There's a new principal at my school this year. I haven't heard yet how that's going. There were some teachers at my school who were there and were doing a good job. So I think the foundation for keeping things from sliding into chaos are there. But yeah, I wonder about that frequently. But I would only know a handful of the students who are there now. I would only have taught seniors. But the first year after I left, when I went back, I walked into the cafeteria during lunch, and one of my students saw me and just screamed, "Miss Wergin!" Half the cafeteria turns, and I'm suddenly stampeded by kids who are coming to hug me. And that was how it was every time I've gone back, and I've gone to all the graduations since then. And it's really good to see that my students have not forgotten about me. I got a Facebook message from a student a while back saying, "Miss Wergin, out of my 13 years in school, you're the only teacher I didn't forget." And so I'd like to think that at least as far as my students are concerned, I'm still alive in their thoughts, and that things I said to them are still helping them to make good decisions and push themselves harder.
I have two questions. First, for Teacher America, does it have to, like, does your major matter in getting the, like, did you have to get a teaching license just to do it, or?
It depends on where you go. In DC, you have to get a master's degree in education. That's part of the deal, but that's not the case everywhere. Teach for America generally does not want people who majored in education. So I majored in international relations and Hispanic studies. You can major in whatever you want, and they'll find somewhere for you to teach.
And then my other question was, were you ever concerned about safety or insecurity as you were doing any of this?
My mom certainly was. My mom sat me down right before I started my first year of teaching, and she said, "Kendra, you must promise me that you will quit if you feel unsafe." And I'm like, "Well, sorry, but that's not going to happen." I actually felt quite safe in my school. There were no metal detectors in my school district. The feeling was they didn't want to make kids feel like they were going to jail when they were coming to school, which I think is a good thing. Doesn't mean that stuff wasn't happening in my building, but I felt pretty safe there. In the Balkans, Kosovo was interesting because of the border stuff. I mean, literally we crossed the border into Kosovo at the same time that the next border down was being blown up, and so we saw this parade of NATO vehicles driving the other direction towards the border. And it was like, this doesn't look good. But no. There are lots of landmines in the Balkans. We didn't ever see any of them. But yeah, I felt much safer, I think, than I originally thought I would.
Can you take us to the timeline for the recruitment process of Teach for America? Like when you apply, the training, leading up to your first day?
You apply during your senior year of college. They have 4 different deadlines, so people do it at different times. We then had 6 months of summer training, which involved teaching summer school in the morning and then spending the rest of the day being taught about teaching. I got 4 hours of sleep during that time, so that was not very good. But finished that, and they're about 2 weeks before the school year starts. You go.
Thank you very much. Thank you.